what we're talking about for today on this Tuesday, right before another weekly reset in this tier, is another problem. Yes, recently we have been in a pretty complaining mood, so we have pointed out the tank shortage and the problem with tanking in Mythic Plus. Now we have an even broader problem, which is damage taken, which is a problem to both the DPS players who die from this damage taken, and it's also a problem for healers who are supposed to be healing this damage taken. And this is for both the raid and Mythic Plus. Even though the damage you take in the raid in Mythic Plus is quite different, it is suffering from the same problem. What is this problem? For example, this is our guild in P1 on Dimensius. When you are early on, you have to heal through the first Devour. That happens in the first few seconds, and you have 2 evokers healing for over 20 million HPS. You can also move to the last phase of the fight, and you're gonna have the same thing with the Extinguish the Stars mechanic that happens at the beginning of the phase, where this time you assign not even 2 evokers, just 1 evoker, and it's 34 million HPS. And this is not, by the way, some kind of humble brag. Just because I'm the one doing the healing, we can change guilds, go to P1, check the healing at the beginning of the phase when the Devour happens, and you pretty much will find the same thing. Actually, starting from the beginning of the damage, the numbers will be very, very similar. You can swap back to P3 with the Extinguish the Stars mechanic, and you will likely have the same results over here. It's a 30 million HPS evoker. And then you can continue to do this for pretty much all of the groups that are doing about the same thing in all of these phases. So you can see this extremely high power of healers, and it's not even the full power, because you see the total number of the healing. What you're not seeing, though, is the fact that this is not even the full power, because it's also extra healing. The full power, if the overhealing was necessary, was 50 million HPS. The full power here, for example, it's 45% overhealing, right? So these numbers would be even bigger. You know, having 50 million HPS means you can top 3 different players from 0% HP to 100% HP every second. 3 different players every second. And this is only 1 healer, and you're playing with 4. And this healer, just like all the others here, are only using 1 cooldown. It's not that the evoker here, to reach this power, had to use Dreamflight and Rewind and Emerald Communion and then Stasis. It only had to use 1 cooldown to reach this power. Now let's go back to Boomer Memory Lane over here, where Method was fighting in Warlords of Draenor more than 10 years ago. What you can see from this, you can see that the HPS of the healers is averaging around 55k HPS, and the HP of the players, it's around 350k. So in short, how long it would have taken for a healer to fill the health bar of a DPS? 55k HPS, 350k health bar, it's about 6 seconds. That's how much it would have taken them to top a player. Now let's go back to Method. We are now expansions ahead. We are halfway through Legion. We are fighting Elisand Mythic. What do we see? The average here is around 700k HPS. The health bar is about 4 million. So it's like 5.7 seconds to fill the health bar of a player. And now we have me, a much younger me, towards the end of Shadowlands. We are playing on Anduin Mythic. You can see that the average HPS is around 15k. The players have almost 80k HP, which is again about 5 seconds to fully fill a health bar with your average HPS. You can then move to the beginning of the next expansion in Dragonflight. You can see that on Razaget, the last boss of the first tier, our average HPS is around 70k, and we have about 430k HP. That's again 6 seconds, more or less, with your average HPS to fill a health bar. Now we can keep going as it gets a bit more interesting. You can see that as we are fighting Farak, if we go a bit deeper into the fight when it averages and evens out, we have roughly 400 more or less 400k HPS, and you can see that our health bar is 1.3 million. So now we are in the 3.3 seconds how long it takes us to fill a health bar. So we have gotten significantly faster compared to just the beginning of Dragonflight. And then this is us just last tier in Liberation of Undermine. You can see the healers having around 3 million HPS, and we have 10.6 million HP, which is about, again, what, 3.4 seconds is how long it takes us to fill a health bar. Now back to Mythic Dimensius, so another tier later. Not even looking at the top results of Mythic Dimensius, even going far lower down, you can see the average here is about 6 million HPS. And the health bar of the players right now is around 16 million. So with 6 million HPS on a 16 million health bar, it's about 2.8 seconds of time that it takes you to fill a health bar. So from where we started all the way back in Warlords or even further up in Legion, even actually at the start of Dragonflight, we have gotten almost twice as fast in how our heals are, how powerful our heals are, and how much power there is in our healing. Now, why does this become a problem? This becomes a problem because, of course, when you are this much faster in healing, the Blizzard's goal when they are designing a Mythic Plus dungeon or a raid boss is to kill you. They want to try to kill you. Obviously, then you have to try to stay alive, but their first goal, if you want to complete a Mythic Plus key or to defeat a raid boss, is that you have to stay alive. So obviously, if our healing power becomes twice as strong as it was a few expansions ago, it means that Blizzard has to adapt to how powerful the healing power is and then create mechanics that can kill you through that much more powerful healing power. We have seen in the examples we had of the few very bursty phases of Dimensius how much power there is on healers even now. Even a single one can pull these kind of numbers. And this works more or less the same in Mythic Plus as well, not just in the raid. Sure, when you look at the overall healing done in a key, it will be pretty chill because in a key, you have not always moments where you have to heal all the time, but when you go back to looking at the bosses that actually require healing, like Swamp Faith, for example, the average number is very similar to the average number we saw for Mythic Dimensius, for example. So it is still pretty high. And of course, don't forget, we're still talking about not even close to being the full power, because once we add the overhealing, this is how much overhealing there is compared to the healing needed. So literally 100% of the healing you did was also overheal. It's like double. It's like a double graph over here. So we have more than enough healing power right now to survive the mechanics. Why is this a problem? Again, it becomes a problem because Blizzard is trying to kill you. Blizzard is trying to design mechanics that can kill you. But clearly, as you can see from here, we have enough power to stay alive from the traditional mechanics that want to kill us. So, AoE damage. Those are mechanics that right now, because of our healing power, has grown to such an extent that are not actually becoming the more dangerous ones. When you're fighting in Mythic Plus, suddenly the more dangerous mechanics are going to be the random bolts, the random charges of mobs, like the little spider bats in Arakara that charge you, or the melee guys in Ecodome Aldani which charge on players. Those kind of mechanics that, as you keep going higher in keys, can hit you for harder and harder, down to being nearly a one-shot, as well as the very dangerous combo of random hit right before an AoE, or perhaps random hit during an AoE, like the Curse of Obliteration, the magical debuff you get from Halls of Atonement. That happens during Thrash. Now the healer can insta-dispel the Curse of Obliteration, of course, but the instant hit of the curse itself is already half your health bar, even in like a 15. And if it happens mid Thrash, it becomes extremely deadly. You also have no way to see who is going on because it's not channeled, it's not casted, it's instant, so it becomes extremely dangerous. So because our healing power grows so much, we have gotten to the point now for quite a while where the only reasonable way to threaten you from dying once the group is pretty good is to just be killed in less than a second. To be killed to the point where the healer can't even respond to the amount of damage you are taking. The amount of times you will die because the healer is trying to spam heal you and it's just too much damage taken is going to be very rare. So in Mythic Plus, you create this environment where, ironically, the most important part of a healer, which is being able to set up big party healing for the big dangerous AoE ability, becomes the least important part of your toolkit, because you are so powerful in those windows that they are not really threatening you nearly as much. What becomes way more dangerous is going to be the one-shots, the targeting of the single player rather than the entire party, and more often than not in ways you can't even predict, because you won't see it target you, you won't know if it targets you, and sometimes it will happen during the AoE, which otherwise wouldn't have been dangerous, and if it does happen, the risk of being one-shot becomes extremely high. Now, when you move back to the raid, a lot of the danger now has to be moved into one-shots again. Except now you don't have a single random cast like it happens in Mythic Plus. Instead, in the raid, it's the damage being concentrated in much smaller windows. So you start needing a multitude sets of raid cooldowns planned for the same moment just to survive, and in some cases it might even require benching the squishiest of the specs, because they would make it much harder for them to survive those windows. For example, last expansion, the last couple of bosses in Yggdrasil practically benched balance druids because they just couldn't survive Tindral and Farak by themselves early on in progression, so they were just benched completely. And the raid healing becomes this cycle of kind of chilling and sleeping for 30 seconds and then do the big healing, go back to chill for 20 to 30 seconds, do big healing again, because otherwise if it was just consistent healing for 2 minutes, you have more than enough power to sustain the healing for 2 minutes and it wouldn't be threatening enough for players. Your HPS is so high, it would be basically impossible to forget to heal a player for like 6 seconds across 4 different healers. So Blizzard has to concentrate the damage taken in much smaller window and make it much more dangerous. You can see the damage taken in P2 of Dimensius. This is not where you die. This is where you can die, or this is where you can die, or this is where you can die, but not in these windows right here. Or you can also see P1 is going to have some similar dangers. You're not going to be dying here or here or here. This and here is where you risk dying. And you can tell it is the way it is, because otherwise how else could you kill players? When you look at this very same phase and you look at the healers healing while still having 48, 30, 47 and 41% overhealing. So they are technically surviving this P1 of Dimensius at 60, 50, 70 and 50% of their max power, and it's enough to keep you alive. That's how potential power they have. So obviously it would be very hard to imagine being able to kill players if you kept the damage very stable and equal when the healing power is so high. You have to intentionally spike the damage to possibly kill you in 2 or 3 hits, so that even if you have this much overhealing, so technically this isn't really necessary, it doesn't matter if a player dies in 2 hits. It takes 18 million damage in 2 seconds. That's where you can die. The same goes in Mythic Plus. You're like, hold on a second, how are groups not doing a 20 or a 21 if this is how much healing they can do? Nobody is ever gonna die if the healing power is so high, because they just get one shot. Because this might as well be the healing done during Thrash in Halls of Atonement while a random caster hit goes through, or the Houndmaster is shooting their crossbow or whatever to one of the players. you might as well have this much healing, but if someone gets hit by 2 ticks of trash plus a hit from the Houndmaster takes 17 million damage in 1.2 seconds, doesn't matter if you have this much healing, you're just gonna die. Now this is where you say, okay, fine, I understand what having too much healing has caused, why it becomes a problem in designing raid bosses, and why does there need to be so much burst damage in bosses, because how much powerful the healing is right now. I also understand why we have this much spiky damage on 1 or 2 players in Mythic Plus that can cause deaths. However, what would be the solution then? Well, the solution in the raid would be much more simple. You just cut the healing down by 50% or more. You just make it as slow as it was 2, 3, 4 expansions ago to actually heal players. You lower the amount of spiky damage you can. In return, also nerf, I'm sorry to all of the DPS who are sad from this, but you nerf all of the self-healing and survivability of all DPS. So if you have a 40% DR defensive, you cut it down to 20%, the healing potion and the hellstone become weaker, your normal self-defense, even in your talents, all of these talents that for no reason give you 10% more stamina or 6% less damage taken, all of these things go away. You don't get any of these free damage reduction in your toolkit as a DPS. You cut the healing of the healers substantially, and then you significantly increase the rot damage throughout a fight and not make the fights nearly as spiky to require such precise and almost all the time stacked use of raid cooldowns as the only way you have to survive, because otherwise the damage is so high. You would also be stopping the tradition of always requiring 1, if not 2 different burst healers to be in the meta comp, because you need burst healing to survive. So we have had tiers where you had double disc be meta, like you had in Amir Josil, or to have double evoker right now, or like you had double evoker in Nerobar Palace, for example, or even double evoker in Vault of the Incarnates in Dragonflight. There would not be nearly as much of a need of that kind of healing if you scaled back on the burst damage you take. The damage windows could still be dangerous. Instead of having heavy damage windows every 40 seconds, you can simply have medium damage windows every 10. So the healers are still busy, the dangerous moments are still there, you just spread them throughout the fight. You don't make them super dangerous in 10 seconds and then chill for a minute and then super dangerous for 10 seconds more. You just lower the healing done and not even necessarily lower the damage taken. You just spread the damage taken to be more even throughout the fight. In Mythic Plus, on the other hand, you don't have other healers, there is only you, the one healer who has to do everything. So for that activity, the easier solution to solve a lot of the frustration as well for random deaths that sometimes players feel like they could do nothing about it because they got RNG'd to death by random hits they couldn't even predict. The easier solution is to move away from the trend of requiring the number one thing to time keys in Mythic Plus being staying alive and going back to requiring damage. So put in more focus on lowering your damage when you fail mechanics or lowering your damage throughout a pool rather than risking a one-shot. So instead of having a random bolt or a random melee charge of a mob hitting you for 90% of your HP, the random charge is going to disorient you for 5 seconds. The random charge is going to stun you. The random charge is going to buff the mob to do more damage. The random bolt is going to give that mob 10% HP as a shield. Is going to give the mob 10% or whatever more damage. The random bolt is going to give you 30% less damage done, 30% less haste. Anything that still slows the group down, because either because the mob is healing, the mob is gaining a shield, or making the group more dangerous because the mob is gaining damage, or slowing you down because you get CC'd, stunned, incapacitated, disoriented, or simply nerfed. You get nerfed. You get damage reduction from the mobs hitting you. And all of this would amount to you being slowed down. So not because you die, not because you lose 15 seconds on the timer and you don't do damage because you're dead, but because the group, the Mythic Plus pack as a whole, will last for longer. So now the most important thing in the group will be to make it in time, to have enough DPS to be fast enough to make it, and no longer about if you can or cannot survive these random one-shot events that happen particularly in trash packs throughout the Mythic Plus key. This would make it feel way more fair to play healer. You would also, as mentioned, be nerfing the healing by like some 50+%, put way more rot damage in the group, because now that all of these random one-shot bolts are disappearing, there is no more damage from these bolts, you need to give the healer something to do, so you can increase the rot damage, make the healer way more busy in keeping everyone alive. Like, you know, increase the rot damage, so you want everyone to be healthy before the Shard of Alkias does his trash, which will be the big AoE. So you want to heal the much higher rot damage to then use your CD for the trash of the Shard, without having to worry about random one-shots killing players while the AoE comes out, while also having lowered the overall healing power of the healer, which, as we have seen from expansions ago to now, has practically doubled in terms of power, and it hasn't really brought any positive things either to the raid or to Mythic Plus. It's not that things have gotten better in the way you have to play both in the raid and Mythic Plus when the healers become so powerful. Blizzard has tried multiple times doing things like constantly increasing the HP of players under the idea that if the health bars are larger, you can take more damage, so the healers have to spend more time healing you. But as we have seen now, it's faster than ever. The healer's average HPS compared to your health bar in this expansion is higher than we have seen tracking all the way back to Warlords, before Mythic Plus was even out. So we need to have a fix to that. It would be nice to see something changing in terms of healer power for both the raid and Mythic Plus getting into the next expansion. Since right now, as we have seen, the ratio of the power of your healer compared to your HP is just too high. The healers are too powerful, which trivializes practically all healing checks in the game, and it makes it feel like the only important things to keep your party alive in Mythic Plus, for example, are no longer about healing. It's about the player using a defensive, how many defensives each spec has, your externals, as well as the RNG in not getting hit, for example, multiple times in a row or twice at the same time, or not getting hit while the AoE is going out. All of these things have nothing to do with healing. All of these things have nothing to do with your ability to use your buttons as a healer in terms of healing. So we hope to see this improve in the next expansion, because it's not too good, too nice of a feeling. And even though it is true the tank issue in Mythic Plus is a bit more problematic at the moment, it would still be nice to also invite more healers to be playing in Mythic Plus. And this meta we have right now, where healing matters but only up to a certain point, until eventually you realize most of the things end up being outside of your control if players die or not. You don't have that much of a say on the meta eventually as a healer. Is not too good of a feeling. So we hope to see this improve somewhat in Midnight after the ending of the War Within, where, as we have seen, we have gotten to very high levels of healing power. We would like to see it scaled down a bit in the next expansion. But for today though, on this Tuesday, this is what we had to point out in this video. With this out of the way, we can leave each other. For now, we can start our goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, that perhaps wasn't as concise as I wanted it to be. under 15 minutes would have been ideal. We kind of got carried away here.